Hey everybody, and welcome to the Rock and Roll Farming Podcast. And today I'm heading not just north, but to the far north, beyond the walls, beyond Hadrian's Wall, but not beyond the Antonine Wall, to Aberdeenshire in Scotland to talk to farmer, grazier Nikki Yoxall. Nikki, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, Will. And I'm actually today in Angus, so the next county
Ah,
below Aberdeenshire. But because we're splitting our time at the moment between two farms, but we'll maybe talk about that a little bit during the podcast.
right. Okay. I should have checked that before I started, shouldn't I? What would what would you describe yourself as? I said farmer grazier there. Is that what you would describe yourself? Someone asks you at a party or something, what do you do? What would you say?
Well, if someone asked me to describe myself, I'd probably say gobby would probably be the first thing. But in terms of how do I spend my time and what do I do? Yeah, I generally say I'm a wearer of many hats.
Yeah.
So it's taken me a while to kind of get comfortable with calling myself a farmer. But yeah, my husband and I run two farms essentially at the moment. We've gone through a bit of a process of moving our breeding herd and kind of having a bit of a split system at the moment. But yeah, so we're farming. We definitely have been running our business as graziers, but I'm also kind of work with a foot in the camp of academia and research. So technically, I'm still a PhD student at the moment. I'm technical director at Pasture for Life, and we also are farming, as I said. So yeah, wearer of many hats is probably the most appropriate label.
There's a lot for us to get into. My ace detective skills tell me that you are not from Aberdeenshire or Angus. So where are you from originally?
Yeah, I'm from just down the road from you, actually. So I was brought up in Shropshire, sort of born in Worcestershire and on that kind of border between Worcestershire and Shropshire, and then spent my childhood in beautiful, beautiful Shropshire. Originally in South Shropshire, and then we moved towards kind of closer to Much Wenlock around that area. And I went to school in Shrewsbury, or Shrewsbury as I used to call it, and I've got I think less posh as I've got older, but yeah, and that's where I'm from originally, and then moved away from that area down south, and then we moved up to Scotland. I think what like 8 years ago. So yeah, moved around a bit, but Scotland is definitely home, and I would not move back to England for sure.
Where did you and James, your husband, meet? Do you meet in
Yeah,
Shropshire?
so no, we met down. We actually met in Devon. So I had been working in a very, very stressful job, and I decided to leave that. And I wanted to take a kind of a year off from a job that was so hard. And I ended up going and working for a company called PGL, like Parents Get Lost. People know it as it's like a kids' holiday company. And I was like, I'm just going to go and do that for a summer, like for a season, and
Yeah.
just yeah, not worry too much about my career and all that kind of stuff. And so went and worked for them on a site in Devon, and James also was working there, and that's where
Ah.
we met. Yeah, so that was back in 2008. Yeah, so
Okay.
quite a while ago.
So are either of you from farming backgrounds?
No, we're not at all. I come from a horsey background, and obviously growing up in rural Shropshire, as you'll know the area, like if you, everyone knows farmers
Yeah.
because if you're in a rural community, you know all your friends are farming, and I was in pony club and involved with various other things, and a lot of my school friends came from dairy farms. So yeah, not from a farming background, but from a rural and horsey and a bit of shooting as well and stuff growing up. James came from like like I guess his interest when we were in outdoors and kind of rock climbing, mountain
Hmm.
biking, that sort of stuff. And then after we met, he got interested in shooting and had friends who were farmers, and that's kind of where it came from. So no, we are both very much first generation.
Right, okay. So where did the desire to farm come from?
Well, I had before moving to Scotland, I was head of department at an agricultural college, and I'd kind of blagged or worked my way into that role because of my teaching experience, and then accompanied by my horsey sort of background, because we had
Hmm.
an equine part of that department. But at the college, we had a college farm that was run by a brilliant guy called Dan, who always gets annoyed when I name check him on any kind of podcast or anything. But yeah, so that's Dan Stamper, who
Hi,
is now
Dan.
based up in Cumbria. That's where he's from originally.
I know
Brilliant
Dan is
guy.
great.
Yeah, so Dan's amazing, and
He is.
he ran the farm, the college farm there, and he was out like plate metering of an evening, and he had a fantastic kind of record in terms of milk from forage, and was really into kind of grass fed, low input, simple systems. And that's where I developed a real love for cows and for farming. And when we got the opportunity to move to Scotland, we were very lucky in that we were able to buy somewhere with a little bit of ground, and we weren't quite sure what to do with it. And James went on a course where he met Rob Havard, who you'll know. And Rob introduced James to holistic management, and James came home saying, we need to get some cows. And so that was it. And yeah, it was an opportunity for us to kind of think about things on a very small scale. And since then, it's kind of got a bit out of hand. And we've got a lot more cows than we started with, and we're managing a lot more acres. But yeah, it kind of farming for us makes sense because it is so intrinsically linked to land management. We don't see farming really as something separate from managing land, and it's so intrinsically connected to food, and food is, we're real foodies, so it all just kind of makes sense.
Wow. And did you have um from the start then, did you have those kind of organic agroecological principles? Was that something that you really believed in and wanted to do from the get-go?
Yeah, definitely. So, like, as a food consumer, we do everything we can to buy organic as much as possible, and that's becoming increasingly difficult where we live,
Mm.
because it's seen as a niche, alternative, expensive option in shops. The food, I mean, it's amazing living in rural places, and many people will recognize this, that you live somewhere where so much food is produced, but it's really hard to get hold
Yeah.
of. And like our local market garden shut down, and the estate that we're now managing the livestock on had a market garden, and that closed because the guy left. And so it's really difficult to kind of
Mm.
get this food. So yeah, organic has always been a really important part of how we think, and the food that we want to buy and the food we want to eat. And so it just, for us, like, it was never even, I cannot comprehend personally the use of something like glyphosate. Like, I can't comprehend that. I don't understand why, and why it would make sense in our system.
Hmm.
And synthetic fertilizer, just in our context, makes
Yeah.
no sense. So it isn't even like we had anything to weigh up. It just was never a question that we would farm in this way. And because we came into farming as a land management approach, it's slightly different, I guess, in terms of, if you're doing a cost benefit analysis, from purely thinking about output, you're thinking about, how do I manage this land in a particular way for these outcomes?
Yeah.
And so that inevitably links more through to kind of agroecological and organic principles than it would those that are focusing on maximized output, for example.
Yeah. Have you it sounds as if you have. So, I mean, if this is a sort of stupid question, tell me, but have you got like a kind of a set of principles, like in terms of a kind of like a mission statement or anything like that? Is there anything that you've sort of have written down or in your mind that you kind of really fundamentally believe in farming wise?
Yeah, totally. So we are holistic management trained. We've gone through the holistic management course.
Yeah.
And the really important part of that is you develop your context. So you set out your statement of purpose,
Yeah.
and you write it down, and you set out what you want your future resource base to be, and you write it down, and you're very clear about what you want to achieve. And that was on our fridge for a long time. And so, yeah, we have a very clear statement of purpose, which is to enable diversity and abundance to nourish our community. So that's why we do what we do. And then underpinning that is all the kind of what we want our life to look like, essentially. And I quite often, when I'm asked to talk to people about holistic management, I use this phrase about, like, what do you want your Wednesdays to look like? It's really about, like, not the big goals, like, oh, I want to go traveling to this place, or I want a this many acre farm, or I want to get to this many people that we're feeding. It's about, what do I want to wake up and do every day, and how do I make decisions that create a life that looks like that. And I think unless you know kind of what it is you're actually trying to achieve, it's very difficult to determine that. So yeah, holistic management really kind of pushes you to be very clear about why you do what you do, and what you want your life to look like.
That's really cool. I like that kind of what you want your Wednesday to look like. And I've also written down diversity and abundance because I think that's going to be the episode title. Love it.
My husband has a T-shirt that says diversity and abundance, and he has worn and washed it so many times that the letters have completely gone. So we need to
I
get a new one printed up, I think.
love that. Okay. Tell me about How Mill, the farm.
So How Mill is home, and it's a very beautiful spot in Aberdeenshire near a little town called Huntly, and it's as you can tell by the name, it's an old mill, and it sits as a house. It sits above the river, looking out across the Devon Valley towards a place called the Cabrach, which is a very wild, remote part, like little corner of northeast Scotland. And there we have about 18 acres. So it's a little small holding. Half of it is species-rich pasture. The other half is native broadleaf woodland and steep bog. And it's a really, really stunning spot with stunning views, south facing. Like it's gorgeous. So I remember the first time we saw it, we were like, this is it. This is our sort of forever home. But obviously on 18 acres, we had our two heifers that we started with, but there's only so much that you can do.
Yeah.
And in terms of, we don't want a market garden. We're not market gardeners. We definitely wanted to graze animals, but we weren't able to kind of do much with 18 acres. So we started regardless, just moving our two heifers with electric fence every day and our little mobile water system. And we noticed that people were driving past and looking at what we're doing, looking over the fence. And a neighbor just really liked what he saw, what we were doing. And he was like, oh, do you want to come and do that on my ground? I've got some ground, hill ground, that I can't put my sheep on because the fences are rubbish. But with your electric fence, you could probably sort it out with the cows and put them on there for a bit, which we did. And kind of 6 years later, we've still got some cattle on there, and we've been helping him transition away from sheep into cattle. And just, yeah, basically people started liking what we were doing. And so using social media and through connections that we made, we were able to create Grampian Graziers. So although home is How Mill, our business, Grampian Graziers, kind of sits over that, which allows us then to work with different landowners. And we've worked, we took on a tenancy for a short period of time, but it didn't really work for us. So we then started working with a rewilding company, trying to get them to realize that you didn't have to just kind of remove animals, that you could use livestock to deliver really great biodiversity outcomes, soil health outcomes, water quality management, all of that sort of stuff. So we were working with them for a while. And then Grampian Graziers has now recently gone into a business partnership with Rottle Estates, which is in Angus. And as a business partnership, we now run Rottle Land and Livestock, and we're managing about 2,000 hectares here with cattle and sheep. So yeah, how kind of tell us about How Mill as like the original small holding where we started and where we are now. It's been a bit of a, yeah, when people say, oh, tell me about your farm, it's like, well, it's a complicated question because actually we work in a way that takes us across lots of different land. Our kind of home base isn't the farm base. And it's been a journey of complexity and issues around land access that has taken us to where we are now.
Yeah, you've come a long way in a very short time, though. Because did you say 6 years ago was it you started?
Well, 6 years ago we bought some cow, yeah, some heifers.
Yeah, so that's
Not long.
no, not long at all. You must. I was just thinking, well, we know each other a bit, and you've got a lot of energy and drive. I'm presuming that James must be the same. I mean, do you like the fact that you are farming? I guess you're dealing with a lot of people, aren't you? And getting off the holding quite as much as I'm sure you love being at home. You're getting off the holding quite a lot. Is that something that you enjoy? That kind of balanced aspect of it all?
It's weird because I'm not an extrovert, which people think is completely insane. Everyone
Yeah,
assumes that I must be a really extroverted person. I'm not at all. I'm an absolute introvert, and I
yeah,
lack confidence socially in terms of me as Nikki.
Yep, me
But
too.
me
I'm
as,
exactly the same. Yeah.
yeah, me as Nikki who works for Pasture for Life, or if I can make it very clear that my presence is related to my work, I'm a completely different kind of level of confidence
Yeah.
to me as just me. And so there's something about, I really love the ability that Pasture for Life gives me and my role there to go across the country, meet loads of people, have all these connections. Like going to Groundswell in a few weeks' time is just a highlight of my year. I absolutely love it. I see so many people I know. I get to have so many amazing conversations. And I really, really enjoy the kind of the ability to be inspired by so many people. It sounds really cheesy, but going to so many different farms, going to different events, learning from different people, hearing about cock-ups that they've experienced and mistakes that have happened, and going, oh God, it's not just us then. We all go through this stuff, and feeling a sense of collective journey of learning. I absolutely love it. And in 2023, I was doing my PhD fieldwork, and that year was such a highlight because I went to something like 52 farms
Wow.
across the year, beyond all my other kind of pasture for life farm visits and stuff. But spoke to 52 farmers as part of my PhD study, and I just learned so much and got so much knowledge and experience. And I think it also really helped. It helped me kind of mediate my own responses to and experience of regenerative agriculture, for example, and kind of how I interact with other farmers. And I think the ability to get off farm and develop your social skills, even if you're not like, oh, I'm going off farm to develop my social skills, but it inevitably happens, like just mixing with more people, getting a more diverse group of people around you helps develop you as a person. And I think that's a cool thing to kind of step back and reflect on and go, oh, okay, I'm changing as a person, and it's because I get to go out and be with all these other people and spend time with them.
100%. Yeah, totally agree. And if someone's listening to this and they're kind of a bit the same, a bit maybe introverted, but they'd like to kind of improve their network and they're recognizing that that would be a good thing for them. Um, what would you say to them? What kind of advice would you give them in terms of yeah, how to put yourself out there?
Yeah, I mean, I am obviously going to say join Pasture for Life because if I don't, our membership manager will give me a right old telling off. But I think finding, and it doesn't have to be Pasture for Life, right? It could be any kind of group, something that
Yeah.
you can join. I mean, I help kind of co-run a couple of WhatsApp groups that are national, that are not to do with Pasture for Life. They're separate. There's a mob grazing, or mob and amp grazing, as we've now called it, UK group, and a regen ag group. And I also run a micro dairy WhatsApp group because all I really want to do is milk cows, but somehow that hasn't happened. So that's like my kind of link through to the dairy world.
Yeah.
And those groups are amazing because they allow you to tap into collectives of farmers. It's not public like on Twitter, X, whatever it's called these days, or Instagram, where you're open to then like a barrage of particularly potentially unwanted engagement. But it allows you to connect with people that are in the same kind of they're in your wheelhouse, or they're in your they're in your kind of same way of thinking, or they have
Hmm.
similar interests to you, and you can kind of connect virtually. And then those groups are really great if you're like, oh, I'm going to be in Cornwall next week, is anyone up for hosting me for a morning for a couple of hours? And I think that yeah, kind of finding groups that you can engage with, and then asking if you can go and visit people's farms is always a really good way to do that. I mean, yeah, I don't know, I quite often find myself, I'm not sure I'm the right person to give advice on how to like expand your network, because I normally find myself in situations and think, how the hell did I get here? And like, how on earth am I, like, my career in education before I moved into agriculture was a series of me just blagging my way into things and then using that as a stepping stone into like a new job or a new opportunity. And it's all of that is enabled by the fact I have ADHD and really don't understand risk.
Yeah.
And so we'll just be like, this is a good idea, I'm going to do it. So yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
definitely contributes.
Yeah. The older I get though, the more I realize that everybody's just blagging it, really.
Oh, totally.
We're all just blagging it, aren't we? Everybody I kind of used to be terrible for kind of putting other people on pedestals and kind of thinking that person's got to there, and God, they're so much better than me, and now I've just yeah, it's a real sort of click moment for me, realizing that everybody's winging it, everybody's
Yeah,
blagging it in some way. But yeah, did you
totally.
um, did you? You mentioned social media. Do you found social media a big help in your farming career?
Massively. And actually, both when I was working in education, Twitter completely changed my life in terms of the opportunities it gave me at that point. And I would say the same within agriculture. And two different Twitter accounts, both delivered really, really great outcomes for me in terms of my career development, the connections I was able to make with people. There was also some really difficult times on there. And there's this really interesting situation where I'm aware that there was a group of people on Twitter who were engaging with me on Twitter, normally in quite a challenging way, who were then having conversations about me in private, being quite negative. And some of those people are now my friends.
Mm,
And there's this like really weird kind of process of how people feel challenged
yeah.
by a young woman, particularly, um, and people saying what they think and then responding to that on social media, and
Mm.
there's the real complexity in it. And I still experience that. And there are individuals I know. I'll tweet something and I can almost tell you as I press send who's going to come in and respond to that. Same men every time. It's
Always,
quite
man.
it's quite tiring. Yeah, yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
I guess it. Yeah, I guess social media is a bit of a glorified high school, isn't it? And, there's a lot of mean girls and boys on there, but there is also, as you've said, a lot of brilliant people as well, isn't there? Who
Yeah.
are kind of very um, open to helping people, new entrants, and as you've said, come and look at my farm and what do you need? And yeah, I suppose always the good outweighs the bad. Do you think that
Yeah.
do you
And
think that
can I just add to that? What
yeah,
I would say is what I've really used it for, which has been amazing. And I've been so welcomed onto farms that are so different from my own.
yeah.
So, like using social media and another name check here for Doug Deere, who runs a massive cattle finishing operation. He and I have been having battles through Farmers Weekly letters and his column for a little while now. But he welcomed me onto his farm. Him and his wife and his two girls, just amazing people. I was there for dinner. We had some really great conversations. If you looked at us from the outside in and our engagement on social media, you'd be like, oh, they are sworn enemies. But
Mm.
actually, having met and gone onto his farm, and we've got a shared interest in whiskey. We both like sharing like which whiskeys we're drinking and stuff, and yeah, and both lots of more things in common than different. And actually, other farmers who have welcomed me onto their intensive, fully housed dairy units, because I would never farm like that. That doesn't, I just couldn't do it. It
Hmm.
doesn't tick my boxes, doesn't float my boat. But they do, and I need to understand why they do what they do, and they could never farm like me. And actually, I think that social media for me now is more about celebrating people who I love and who I think are amazing, and connecting with people who farm very differently. I'm less interested these days in the kind of echo chamber where
Yeah.
we're all just patting each other on the back going, yeah, I think this. Yes, I also think the same. So I think, yeah, being quite clear about how I want to engage with it is important.
That's really interesting. And for listeners who might not know, uh, Doug Deere, as you said, is a beef and arable farmer in Yorkshire. I don't know Doug, but I really enjoy his columns in Farmers Weekly, and it's not that I usually I don't always agree with them, but I find it challenges me in a positive way, and
Mm.
I'm sure he wouldn't agree with me either with things as well. But uh, I think that's really interesting. I think a lot of people are waking up to that the how damaging echo chambers can be, and they're not only in agriculture but in wider society as well. But yeah, I'm glad
Uh,
you've yeah
Yeah, I think there's something as well about we're not very good at disagreeing. And just to reference one of my other favorite podcasts, The Rest is Politics, the whole like disagreeing agreeably
yeah
thing.
yeah
Like, I find it fascinating in agriculture. There's so much infighting. Like, as a sector, our emotional intelligence is on the floor. Like, we're
mm.
really not good at dealing with our emotions, and not just individually, but like how we interact with other people. Like, so
Absolutely
we
not.
just need an overhaul of like emotional intelligence as a whole sector. And people don't seem to understand that you can disagree with someone but really get on with them and do it in a polite and respectful way.
Yeah.
And quite often what happens, and I'm not saying I get this right because I definitely don't, we all are on a learning curve with it. But I think that there is something about, you don't have to just tell everyone they're amazing in order to be supportive. There is a
Mm.
space and a place for constructive challenge and disagreement, but that doesn't mean that you have to tear each other down.
No.
And that's something we're really bad at, because farmers will just tear each other down, or they'll say all farmers are amazing, and they're not very good at this middle space, which is saying, well, actually, I don't agree with you
Mm.
as a person. I think you're awesome and I love what you're doing in this and this, but there are bits of your farming practice that I don't agree with, or bits of your politics that I don't agree with. But we're not really very good at that. It's a difficult, and I don't know if that comes from the zeitgeist of the fact that most people in farming feel under the cosh at the moment and
Yeah.
feel under a lens, and also lots of people work on their own, so they don't get
Mm.
much interaction with other people, and there's a lot of emotional kind of reactions. There's a lot. It's a very reactive sector. We're not very balanced emotionally, I don't think, a lot of the time.
Yeah, I'd agree. Very defensive, I think, aren't we? I mean, and a good example of that is, I think, is not everybody, but a large proportion of the farming industry's kind of reaction to uh, the vegan movement over the last decade, say, and whereas I think a lot of farmers kind of got very, very defensive because they saw it as a threat, when really, and therefore started attacking vegans. It was there was that weird sort of few years on social media where it was all kind of farmers versus vegans and vegans versus, it was ridiculous. Whereas if we'd have took a step back and thought about it, it doesn't, whether vegans eat meat or they don't. They're still eating food produced by
They eat
farmers.
food.
It's silly, isn't it? And I often just wish that sometimes wider industry would be a bit more comfortable in our own skin and a bit more kind of loud and proud about what we do as farmers, and without worrying too much about what other people are saying about us. Does that make sense?
Totally. And I think we also are pretty bad at thinking that we're something special, and not recognizing our privilege. Like, that's a
Yeah.
big thing in farming. It was very painful for me watching the debate after inheritance tax. And as a first generation farmer with no children, this whole debate, I sit outside of it.
Hmm.
So, maybe I don't even have a view and I shouldn't have a view. But from my perspective, it feels that the there was a lot of people standing in front of cookers that cost more than most people's
Yeah.
car, or like a bunch of people standing in front of an Arga talking about how difficult their life is if they're going to have to sell something, and then they go outside and they get into a truck, and it's, regardless of who's paying for that or when it was paid for, the optics and the PR around it is difficult for people who are not from the farming community to understand. And I
Yeah.
think that, yeah, there are just complexities about our PR with others. People expecting to be thanked for producing food, whereas from my perspective, I thank my customers for buying it. And it just,
Yeah.
and who knows who's right, but I just think we have not got a cohesive message in the sector, and part of that is because the sector is so split, it's so diverse. We've got, farmers are not all the same, they are incredibly diverse group of people, and also really not diverse in some ways. So there's the complexity around, racially not diverse, not often diverse in terms of their politics, maybe more diverse than one would think, but generally,
Mm.
fairly homogenous in their politics potentially, but yet very diverse in terms of business structure or access to land, or this, or farming system. So the complexities of diversity and and homogeneity are difficult in terms of them presenting a cohesive PR strategy. So yeah, I'm halfway through listening through the last episode with the marketing guy. Is it Andrew? Yeah,
Andy Venables,
yeah,
yeah.
Andy. And yeah, I'm interested to kind of carry on listening to that episode, because I think, yeah, he's kind of talks a bit about that.
It does. Just on that diversity point of view, and you and I have talked about this before and both done work with it in terms of diversity of the people in farming. As you say, a lot of us have very diverse businesses, and we're diverse in some ways, but not in others. And we're really not in terms of people, into at farm level, but also at a leadership level in the farming industry. How do you how do you think we can improve that? Because when I tried to do stuff with the Oxford Farming Conference with that, I found that so many people recognised it as a problem and could see the benefit of diversity in terms of leadership, but also when you get to into those organizations, they're so kind of slow moving. It's hard to implement rapid change. You know, you come up against barriers, I guess is what I'm saying. Have you got any thoughts on that?
I think it's interesting, isn't it? And I'm really excited that we've got people like Emily Norton out
Yeah.
there kind of taking roles like that. Sue Pritchard in FFCC. These are
Yeah.
phenomenal women that are just
Yeah.
such an inspiration. And I'm not, and I'm not saying that in a kind of just, like a throwaway platitude. Like these women inspire, seriously, they're
They do.
phenomenal. And then we've got other people in the sector who are not heading up big organizations, but are showing leadership, people like Claire Whittle, who I know you know well. And just some really, really phenomenal women doing great things. But often there are structural issues that mean that that's more difficult for them to
Mm.
kind of to access particular roles, or and I think that often is discounted and it's just underestimated. We did quite a bit of work in Scotland through a project that was funded by the Scottish Government with Pasture for Life and the Land Workers Alliance a few years ago, and it was training specifically for women on farm around agroecological food production. And one of the challenges that we had was convincing Scottish Government that we needed to have additional funding to pay for childcare and transport, because often it's these structural issues that get in the way of women just accessing training or
Yeah.
going to events, and trying to make sure that there was maybe funding for backfill. So, can someone else pick up that person's role when they're not there, not just in terms of childcare, but other things as well. So I think often we forget about these real structural issues. And actually, we can say this across farming, the amount of academic workshops I go to, there's no farmers present. And I'm like, well, if you paid for their travel, you're expecting them to come here off their own back. So there's something
Mm.
about recognizing the structural barriers to access to events, to training, to experiences. And I think particularly for women, particularly those who have the predominant childcare responsibilities in their family, it really has to be addressed. And there's also something about like confidence of women and women only spaces operating and acting in a very different way for women, and men not getting upset about that. And I think that I don't understand why, if we run an event just for women, why there are men out there who have to come and complain about it. Like, it's got nothing to do with you. Just go away. You don't need a view on
Some
this.
women do as well.
Oh, they do.
I've
Yeah,
encountered that.
absolutely.
I've
Yeah,
encountered that. I remember
yeah,
having a discussion with a woman who was at an agriculture event who was very, very against women only events in agriculture. And I kind of explained to her, look, my wife has been out of the workplace for a little bit and she's lost her confidence a bit because she's been at home with the kids. And she would find it very, very intimidating to go a, what is nearly always a male dominated
yeah.
space. So she finds it much easier. And I was able to she hadn't actually thought of it like that, but I do think, yeah, it goes back to that earlier chat we had. Not everything works for everybody, does it? We've got to all be
Yeah.
we've got to really recognize that there isn't a single formula that works for everybody.
Yeah, and it's that thing about recognizing privilege. And I've had lots of
Mm.
arguments with women online about this, where women have said, well, I've grown up with three brothers, and as long as I work hard, I'm viewed as just as good as them. And it's
Yeah.
like, just because something doesn't affect you doesn't mean it doesn't affect other people. And the fact it doesn't affect you is your privilege. And that's
Mm.
great for you. That's amazing. No one is trying
Yeah.
to say that you're any worse for that. This isn't a reflection on you, it's a reflection on the systemic inequalities that exist within our society,
Mm.
that mean that for this group of people over here, it is a challenge and it is a barrier, and we need to try and address that. that issue and help those women, or whoever they are, whether it's a group of young people, new entrants, women, people of color, whoever that particular group is, if they feel marginalized and they feel that there are barriers stopping them from accessing resources or opportunities, then that's very real. And just saying, well, I don't experience it, therefore it's not true, is incredibly selfish, and really, it just lacks recognition of one's own privilege. And I think I've had to learn this over a long time. And a very good friend of mine, Clem Sanderson, who's a phenomenal woman, really helped me kind of get to grips with this. So I grew up in a very privileged background, privately educated, kind of affluent part of Shropshire. Used to say Shrewsbury, not Shrewsbury, as I said earlier. I mean, you can tell from that kind of the background.
Yeah.
Had horses, went on holiday, all that, grew up skiing, all that kind of, middle class, upper middle class kind of lifestyle. And predominant, I would have said, kind of conventionally probably, well, conservative with a small and big C,
Yeah.
politics, if you like, within my family. And it really is a process of suddenly realizing through various events that happened in my life, and then engaging with people who I'd never engaged with before, whose lives looked very, very different. And when you are confronted by a whole group of society you didn't even know existed because you were so privileged you didn't need to know they existed, and realizing that not everybody lives a life like yours, that for me suddenly was like, oh wow, okay, hang on, all the things that I thought were normal are a huge privilege, and have really allowed me, even though I had struggles during my teen years, to still come out of school with GCSEs, A levels, end up getting a degree, now doing my PhD, like all of that stuff. If I hadn't had that, all of the privilege that comes with being middle class, none of that would have happened. So it just, and it takes a while to recognize your own privilege. And I think once you do, you then are on this journey of, oh, okay, I start seeing the world differently. But it's a huge ask for people to do that when they are on a daily basis worried about, am I losing my SFI payment?
Yeah.
Am I, what's the weather doing? Can I get out on this? Can I go and get this work done on this field? But the weather's been really bad. So asking the farming community to deeply reflect on their own personal situation when they're when everything else is going on around them in their business is a big ask.
Yeah, for sure. Just on that privilege, sometimes with the agroecological kind of regenerative movement, if you like, which has grown dramatically over the last several years, and I guess I've got a lot of friends in that sector, and I go to Groundswell and have been for years, and all that kind of thing. I have occasionally, and not at Groundswell, but one or two of the others, I have occasionally felt. I remember going to one in particular agroecological event, and I felt like everybody else there had a posh accent apart from me, and yet, I felt like there was a little bit of not understanding consumers, and there was a lot of talk of we're adding value to our product and food is too cheap, and all this kind of thing. And I felt like sometimes, I don't know, the town where I come from, the people in that town are not thinking about whether their food is organic or they're thinking about, can I feed my children today? So I sometimes think, and I guess it goes back to that bubbles a little bit, that occasionally the regenerative farming movement perhaps doesn't think about that enough. Is that a fair comment, do you think? Have you ever felt that?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, it's interesting. Agroecology as a movement, as a science, as a practice is deeply involved with and supports ideas of social justice. And
Yeah,
agroecology is very well connected to the peasant kind of farming movement, particularly in the global south. So there's something about
for
how
sure.
we perceive and understand agroecology in the global north and in the UK and Europe particularly, that is quite different from how
Mm,
agroecology is experienced elsewhere in the world. And in the US, agroecology and regenerative agriculture are much more aligned, in that if you talk about regenerative agriculture in the US, actually what they often are describing is what many of us would consider agroecology.
Mm.
And the difference being that, essentially, you'll know this, but just if anyone's thinking, aren't they the same thing, who's listening, a really simple way of looking at it is that regen ag is what happens on farm and kind of can end at the farm gate, whereas agroecology has been very nicely described as the ecology of the whole food system. So it is interested in not only what happens on farm, but also post farm gate in terms of supply chain, but also the kind of social and political element about land access, who makes the decisions, who pay, where's the money going, who has the right to make a particular decision about somebody else's land or food system, et cetera, et cetera. So there's within agroecology a politically inherently political aspect to it that I think often when you're living in a country that is predominantly quite privileged gets lost. And I think you're right. The argument that particularly for red meat producers, trying to argue for higher prices is a tricky one, given that some of our prices are the highest globally. And it costs me as a fully pasture-fed farmer very little to produce meat. It doesn't cost me a lot of money to do that. I can do it pretty cheaply. Our cost of production really is quite low. So I think arguing that people should pay more for what I'm producing, personally, for me, doesn't make sense. Within Pasture for Life, we have a different view on that. But my personal view is that, when we sell our beef direct, we try and price match as much as possible to the supermarket so that we are a viable alternative for those people locally who are just concerned about feeding their kids. They're not necessarily thinking about all of the other things that go alongside that food production system. So I totally agree with you. I think that there are some regen / agroecological events that just even the way that they're shared and marketed feel like, I actually was trying to describe it to somebody earlier today in a call, and I was like, is it like the Bloomsbury set kind of, if we brought that back now to 2020s and like put them into a farm setting, is that what it is? It's this kind of like, I definitely don't feel like I'm in that. I feel very outside of that. I don't think I'm quite cool enough and my fashion sense isn't good enough. But there is something about like the talking shops we got ourselves into, and lots of people kind of nodding and agreeing. And that's why I think it's really important to get out onto farms that are the antithesis of what you think is a good farming system, because it just grounds you a bit and it sense checks you a bit. As a friend of mine who's based in North Wales says, it will put some manners on you going and working somewhere like that. Or I love that phrase.
Yeah. All right. Taking you just back to the farm a little bit. What kind of ecological improvements have you seen on the farm, and not just on the home farm, but the land that you manage? And what kind of timescales, how quickly do you see these changes ecologically?
So there's quite a lot in that. I guess what I would say is that through changing grazing management, if you're taking on ground that has been set stocked and you're then changing your management to a much more adaptive kind of multi-paddock grazing that we do, we've seen above ground plant responses in a year, like with less than a year. Like within a growing season, we see different species coming through, different plants expressing themselves, different flowering species that no one would have known was there because they'd historically just been eaten out every time they tried to grow. So we do see very quick above ground responses. I would say looking at like the biggest parcel, so like the 800-acre estate that we had been managing prior to moving here, that we've still got a few cows on at the moment on part of it, I'd say 4 years there. Like the grass there this spring, given how dry it's been, is absolutely flying. Like the way that sward has changed in 4 years is almost unrecognizable. The massive reduction in some of those healing plants that most people call weeds, like thistles and docks, it's incredible to see how areas of heavy loafing and animal presence in set stock systems, like around water troughs, gateways, along hedges, in little sheltered dips, how when in the first year or two, massive amounts of docks and thistles coming through, like as tall as me, like 5 foot something. This year, massively changed, much less present. If they are growing, they're quite stunted, often under attack from various aphids,
Mm.
huge numbers of dung beetle, dock beetles as well, which are changing the structure of the dock plants and kind of and stopping them from becoming quite so prevalent. So I'd say I think it's probably like a 4 year kind of cycle to get to a place where you feel like, oh yeah, we're really having a change here and this is very different. And it's interesting, we just moved all of our breeding cows down to this other estate that has been historically set stocked and has been it's not been managed for ecosystem health. It's been managed for other, particularly on the imbi really hasn't been managed for that. And the landowner won't mind me saying that. And coming here and just being like, oh gosh, this is hard. Like the grass quality, the forage, just the amount of biomass is really, we're struggling a bit. It's been hard this spring. But knowing that the other place we've been able to do it in 4 years, at least we know, okay, we can now map what the next few years are going to look like, how we grow the herd, how we manage the grazing, what do we need to do between now and then, if we know that we've got a ballpark of 4 to 5 years to kind of get to a place where it's really flying. So yeah, I mean, and just in terms of data and numbers, we've been running a bale grazing field lab along with 6 other farms across the UK, and we're seeing after bale grazing, so where we're rolling bales out and feeding them on the ground, an increase in soil organic matter, because we're using loss on ignition to reflect a previous experimental protocol of kind of over 10% increases in 2 years. So we know that there are increases quite quickly under certain management techniques. We just are still not clear on having all of the data available for that.
Yeah. So yeah, quick changes because 4 years in farming terms is nothing. So yeah, really quick to see those changes.
Yeah.
Tell me
It's like,
about
for me, it's the power of rest, right? Like if you're creating a system where anywhere where we've got animals, the majority of the land doesn't have animals on it at any one time. We've got them in one group, maximum 2 groups, really, moving them frequently, ideally daily, but in some situations, because of water infrastructure, it might be every 2 days. Like at the moment, they're moving every 2 days just because of challenges around fencing infrastructure here. But the majority of the estate of that ground that we're managing doesn't have animals on it, and just allowing plants to do their thing really does help do a lot of that kind of remedial fixing work. And that being the case during the summer, if you take animals off the ground in the winter, all you're doing is creating rest. But if you create rest in the summer, you also get recovery. So it's understanding that those two things are not the same. Rest is a tool that leads to recovery, and it's that in the growing season that really makes a difference of how that soil behaves, or how that soil responds to plants growing in the way that they do, and those kind of ecosystem function and process happening.
Yeah. Tell me about agroforestry and tree grazing. You mentioned that you've got some woodland on the farm.
Yeah, so cows in trees, it's amazing. Like you put some cattle in a wood and you just suddenly are like, oh, that's where they're meant to be. Like watching a cow like stretch her neck up and kind of wrap her tongue around some leaves just out of reach is a really beautiful thing to see. And we put cattle in existing woodland because we didn't know what else to do with them during the winter. We were like, oh, it's nice and sheltered in here. Let's chuck them in this bit. And it just is a game changer for us. We've never had to worm our cattle. We've never had to use any fungicides. We don't use any treatments at all. We're frequently FEC testing. And all of that, I think, is from diverse pasture, frequent moves, and access to tree browse. And those things, that diversity of diet, the different nutritional benefits that you get from different tree species at different times of the year, all really helps to kind of create optimal health for animals. So yeah, like having livestock in woodland systems for me is such a no-brainer. And we also see like the plant responses under the trees is very different to pasture away from trees, and being able to get a bit of an earlier grass growth and protected during times when maybe we've got less rainfall. And if we've got a frost, we'll see a lot of frost out in pasture, but even when there are broadleaf trees that have lost all their leaves in winter, underneath them you won't get frosted grass. So they just really help to kind of mediate and create a bit more of a reduce the peaks and troughs of farming, which often happen. I think if the more trees you have in the system, the more you can keep an even keel across the year. And I think, reflecting, and again, who am I to say anything because I don't live in Wales? But the Welsh plans around, 10% tree cover on any farm. For me, if someone was going to pay to have 10% of your farm have trees on it, I can't remember the detail of whether there was capital funding to actually pay for the tree planting, but like that for me would be amazing because it
Yeah.
would just, I think we're too caught up in this either or, and that either or has come from historic policies, right? Like the cap, something that was when we had common agricultural policy, things that were either included or not, whether they were eligible or ineligible features, and whether woodland was allowed to be included or not. So we've had decades of binary thinking around land use, and actually when we start bringing it together, we realize that the total outcome is greater than the sum of its parts. But it takes a lot of gut and confidence to test that. And I think that's hard to do. And then that isn't supported by things like tenancies where, the tenant farmer's benefiting, but the landowner has to
Yeah.
be okay about it, and all that kind of complexity. So yeah, gets
Yeah.
messy.
Yeah. I think, yeah, and you're right. And all the sort of extreme weather and even the dry spring we've had, if you're not thinking more about shelter and shade at the moment, then, as a farmer, then I don't know what to say to you because, yeah, you're right about trees. I know they don't fit for all systems and all farms, but something that we've certainly been looking at much more here.
Yeah,
Um,
and there is again, it's like having the benefit of being able to put cattle in our setting into existing woodland. For me,
mhm.
that's really attractive. Having to then take a field and plan an agroforestry system is harder. That's more
Yeah,
difficult. That's more challenging. So cows in trees, for a simple phrase, is fraught with complexity depending on how old the trees are. Where are they? Have you just got to plant them now? Have you got to protect them in a particular way? Is it an existing woodland? Can you just open the gate on a wood and let them in for a few days? Like all of that, it's way more complex and difficult than just we need more livestock in trees. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
a very simple way of thinking about it.
yeah, for sure. How do you sell your beef from the cattle? Is it all direct sales, or are you lucky enough to have a local abattoir? How do you sell it?
It's not all direct, or it was all direct, and then we've upped numbers. And basically, I love I love people eating our beef, and I love them telling me how good our beef is. I don't love selling it. It's hard. And and I
Yeah,
really wish that there were more operators delivering that bit of the business. Like if someone said to me, I will take over entire sales of all your beef that's going to go direct and charge you a commission to do that, I'd be like, crack on, have it, do it, love it. And so if anyone listening wants to do that, get in touch. Um, but yeah, so about 50% of our beef has been sold direct. We are keeping it quite small. And as we grow the business actually for this on this estate we're on now and in this new business partnership, particularly for the next 5 years, just to make sure we can cash flow everything, we're going to be selling stores. So yeah, 10-month-old as we wean in March, keep the calves on cows all summer, all winter, because it's cheap, works really well for us. Wean at 10 months and then send them off to finish somewhere else that's pasture fed. So that's our plan here. So yeah, we have been over the last year. So I'd say it's about 50% direct, and the rest of it has been sold, selling animals fat, but to the abattoir, and then the abattoir just send that wherever they want to. That's up to them. So our best local abattoir from our base in Aberdeenshire is 2 hours from there.
okay.
And yeah, we don't have local abattoirs around here. It's always going to be but everything's 2 hours in Scotland. You live in Scotland and everything that's 2 hours away is still kind of local. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's still 50%. That's a lot though. I totally get what you mean about sales. Anything we are doing here that involves sales, my wife Sarah does it. I'm useless at sales. I'm just not. I don't like it. I don't like selling stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think it's also understanding, and again, like Andy's podcast that he did was brilliant because he was talking about like helping people to identify a pain point and that you can provide the
Mm,
solution to that. but like it's not just about putting some videos on social media and going, look at our beef like that.
No,
I'm quite happy to build a social media following based on my interest, what I think, my views, and if people like it, great, come and follow. But using that as a tool to then sell a product, it's hard, it's
it
really
is.
hard work,
Yeah, you've
and
got
it's specialist knowledge to be
it
able to do
is.
that well.
It is. People who are good at sales are, yeah, super talented.
Mm. And
Tell
there's
me,
I was just going to say there's a great farm. So Kate Martin, who's down at Treeway Farm in Cornwall, like they're right near the very kind of, yeah,
yeah,
like right down in the very southwest. She's amazing at it. Like she loves it as well. And I think, yeah, if there are people who love it and who really enjoy it, then amazing. Like let them fly with it. I think often there's an expectation from the policy groups within agroecology and regenerative that all farmers should just try a bit harder to sell direct, and that,
yeah,
well, if you just sell direct and if you just go and build that local food system, everything will be solved. And it's like,
yeah,
stop expecting us to do that. Like we're already having to be good at multiple jobs on farm, let alone now become sales and marketing specialists.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely agree. You mentioned Pasture for Life several times, and you work for them and as an organisation. For people who might be in another country or never heard of it before, just tell us about Pasture for Life and the principle behind it.
Yeah, so it's a UK wide organisation. We're a not for profit, and we basically believe that grazing animals power the regeneration and the sustainability of rural communities, landscapes, soils, and we're very much pro grazing livestock. So we have 1,500 members who all pay to be members. A very reasonable amount of, I think it's £100 a year plus that. And then we have about 10,000 people who are kind of supporters who kind of access our resources and our newsletter.
Okay.
And they are mostly the UK, but some of them are abroad. And then, so our focus very much is about kind of meeting people where they are in terms of their farm system and helping them to get to where they want to be. Normally, those who are interested in grass-fed, pasture-based systems. We also run a certification scheme, which is the Pasture for Life mark. And that means that the ruminant animals in that system are 100% pasture fed. So they eat only what they can graze, and then also conserved forage, like predominantly hay, but often always also silage, haylage. And we certify the animal. So not the land. It's not like organic where the land is certified. It's the animal that is certified, which is great for graziers or people on more informal grazing arrangement and land access arrangements. And so we certify the animal and also the product. So whether that's meats, dairy products, leather, fiber, leather and wool. So I think a lot of people think of us as being like a supply chain organization that is focused only on fully pasture fed, but actually that's only about 15% of what we do. The majority of our work is around knowledge exchange, farm events, community. We also offer a mentoring service, a consultancy service, and a lot of my work is tied up in research. So developing the research base for low input agroecological regenerative grass-based systems in the UK.
Awesome. Does it tend to be mostly smaller farms, or have you got quite sizable businesses as well?
Yeah, there's this real misconception that it's a hobby farmers organization. And I think maybe it started off predominantly with smaller farms, and it was, it's kind of 15 years old, I think, this
Hmm.
year, 14 years old this year as an organization. We have some really big farms. Our biggest sheep flock is 3,000 ewes that's
Okay.
certified.
Yeah.
And so the range is really big. So we go from, 3,000 ewe hill farm through to somebody with, 20 very specific native bred sheep where they're certified because of the wool. So we have really big range, but I think our average dairy herd is about 220 cows from our certified dairy farms. Member farms, it's much broader. And our average for our certified farms, they actually, our research that we've done with a particular project we're in at the moment, our farms are bigger than the UK average.
Hmm. Okay.
So that, yeah, there's a lot of assumptions around, it's smallholders, it's hobby
Yeah.
farmers, it's people doing this on a part-time basis, and that just isn't the case. And it's been very interesting through some of this analysis we've been doing through various research programs to really kind of shine a light on the reality of these farm systems, both in terms of profitability, but also farm size and how those farms operate in terms of the business structure as well.
And I'm guessing that your members have different motivations as well. Sometimes it will be for business reasons and the markets they're selling into. Sometimes it will be just something they fundamentally believe in, or I guess there's all kinds of diverse businesses involved.
Yeah, that's right. I'd say that for certified farms, often it's because it makes business sense and they want to kind of prove to somebody, whether that's competitors or whether it's their customers, that
Hmm.
that what you're getting is what you say you're getting or they're getting. From membership perspective and being part of that wider membership that accesses our webinars and our events and all those other things that we're doing, mentoring that I've talked about, consultancy, etc. I think those people, it's more an intrinsic sense of I like this kind of farming. I like these people and I'm willing to put my hand in my pocket to pay for a membership fee because I get to continue to support this and
Hmm.
access these opportunities. And a lot of people as well kind of engage with us because of our research presence and the work that we do through big European funded projects, but also kind of smaller field labs and on farm trials. And people want to support that and care about it and have a vision for low input livestock and want to enable that and support that. And so, yeah, keen to kind of do that through becoming a member. And we
Yeah.
also have lots of members who aren't farmers. I think we're something like 85% farmer members, and the other 15% are butchers, restaurateurs, academics,
Interesting.
yeah, chefs,
Right.
students, all sorts of different people who are just interested in what we do.
Do you get chefs? Are they? This is a controversial subject with farmers, but sometimes some chefs prefer grass-fed meat, some chefs prefer grain-fed meat. But
Yeah.
I'm guessing that the chefs and the people involved would have sort of quite strong opinions on that.
I would say so. I think there's a real mix around what a chef is looking for in a particular product and whether
Mm,
all they're interested in is a product on that chopping board or whether they're interested in the kind of backstory to that product
mm,
and how and their role as a chef in terms of the wider food system. And so I think it's really varied. For some chefs, provenance is really key.
mm,
Other chefs, provenance is key, but when you actually dig into the provenance, it's non-existent. I've eaten in Michelin star restaurants in Scotland that have maps on the table, and I know because I know some of the farms that they are quoting don't reflect the reality of what they're
mm,
saying is happening. And I think that so there's the it's a
mhm.
there's a PR sales marketing element to all of that as well, isn't there? So and I'm not a chef, so I couldn't I yeah, it's difficult for me to say, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Can I just ask, and I've spoke to quite a lot of other farmers, both for the podcast and out and about, and I've done a lot of hedge planting and changed quite a lot of stuff on the farm in recent years, and I've found that being more, and I don't know, I tend to not a big fan of labels, so I don't know what kind of farmer I'd describe myself as. I'd just say I've been quite late to discovering that working with nature is good for me mentally. Um, when I've seen suddenly we've got barn owls back on the farm, and because of stuff I've done, I've found that really I don't know what's the word, supercharge me, I guess. Do you find that a lot with the farmers you speak to, and have you found it yourself that kind of working with nature element, is that good for you mentally?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the basis of my PhD is looking at how the agroecological transition often is kind of powered by and enabled by a connection with nature.
Mm,
And some amazing farmers that I worked with who would not describe themselves as regenerative or agroecological, but very excitedly kind of sending me videos of orchids or dragging me off to some kind of boggy corner because they found some cool flower that they want to show me or whatever it is. So,
yeah.
and I think all farmers, every single one of the farmers that I engaged with through my PhD had a connection with nature. And often it was a particular like a particular bird or a particular view or a tree. So there's always something on every farm that people engage with and that they're connected with.
Mm,
And I think that there's so much research out there that says that nature connection drives improved mental health outcomes. It improves your just general mood, well-being, health as well. So there's a very, very strong relationship between those things. Um, I think often my concern within farming, again, it's this binary thing I've talked about already, is that all too often we are separating nature out and putting it as the hedges and edges without recognizing that nature is just another word for ecosystem function
Mm.
and stability, and that ecosystem function and stability is essentially the underpinning engine, if you like, not trying to put a mechanistic view on a natural system, but it's the thing that powers our farms to grow food. And too often we forget that we entirely rely on the fact that the sun shines and that the soil works in the way that it does in order to run businesses. And there's that whole thing in holistic management about solar dollars are the only real currency, because the only thing that we know that we can rely on is the sun. And so how we capture that sunlight and turn that into something that we can sell, by spending as little fossil fuel dollars on it as possible to get there, is the only way to kind of have long-term business resilience. So yeah, I think the way that we think about nature often, I worry that we compartmentalize it into a hedges and edges. Aren't we doing well for everybody else? And someone should reward me for this. Or we put it into a place of, and it, I go out and I find the barn owl and it makes me feel good, but that's kind of all it does, without recognizing that we are inherently a part of it. We are part of the ecology, we are part of the ecosystem. And I do worry that we are becoming increasingly disconnected and seeing nature as something that we observe, like taking ourselves off land, calling it rewilding, and then encouraging people to pay to visit it and observe as some kind of voyeur. Like that, for me, that's problematic. And it's as problematic as a farmer saying, well, I've got some nice hedgerows, so that's me box ticked for nature.
I've never really thought about it like that. That's a really interesting take. I've not really come across that before, that way of thinking about it.
In,
That's
in what way do you mean?
well, in terms of observing nature,
Yeah.
as yeah, I suppose I'm probably a little bit guilty of that, being maybe a bit self-congratulatory of some of the stuff we've done on the farm. But yeah, I just haven't really thought about it like that before. That's interesting. That's going to send my mind whirring all day now.
I don't think there's anything wrong with it per se. I mean, I love standing. I go up on the hill and look back at the view across the glen,
Yeah.
and it takes your breath away. I mean, it's beautiful.
Mm.
And hearing curlew every single day here
Have
is
you got
just such a
yeah.
privilege. Yeah, we've got
We
quite a big curlew breeding
have
population
you?
here,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
lots of lapwing, lots of curlew, lots of
Mm.
redshank. We've got grey partridge. You list the birds that everyone desperately wants to have here, and they're here in great numbers. And that's thanks to a very, very committed landowner and an excellent gamekeeper who
Mm.
keepers this ground very well. But all of that stuff it gives us wonder and it gives us joy. And there's something very powerful, important about that. But I think we endanger ourselves and our landscapes if it stops there.
Mm.
And absolutely, let's revel in the joy that nature gives us, but at the same time recognize the role that I'm going to hesitate to call nature she, plays in kind of allowing us the privilege to run our businesses in the way that we do. And my personal view is the less that we faff around with that, the more resilient the system is, the more financially profitable the system essentially
Mm.
is, and the more able we are to kind of continue to keep going. I guess this is the resilience piece, regardless of external shocks.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I really am going to be thinking about this all day now. You've kind of my also my ADHD brain has whizzed off now somewhere else. So yeah, I'm gonna have to regain my composure. But yeah, I think about that all day. What are your long-term goals for the business? Are you have you reached the sort of size you want to get to at the farm, or what I'm guessing that you would have a sort of 5, 10, 20 year plan, knowing you. Do you?
Yeah, so we've just gone into this business partnership this year, and so as part of that, we've obviously had to do 5, 10 year projections in terms of, because our business partner who is kind of co-invested with us in this business wouldn't do that without having the numbers in front of him. So yeah, we've got a very clear plan for the next 5 years. Some of those things already, having been here just for a few months, have come forward from year 3 to now, and some things are being pushed back. So there's obviously always going to be a bit of wiggle room in that, but long term, we want to be able to demonstrate here at Rottle that we can deliver a farming system that is totally integrated into the rest of the estate's business and activities, that is highly geared towards nature outcomes, whilst also providing fair salaries and wages for the people who are here, as well as producing food, and creating a resilient community here. So that's a big part of our work here. I would love the land that we have moved away from, because of it being sold and a new buyer coming in. I would love it if we could have all of that back and run a business there as well. But the landowner is taking their time, as is their right, absolutely, to work out what they want to do and how that's going to look. So, yeah, I guess an ideal situation would be the partnership here and also the operation back in Aberdeenshire, both running. We'd probably be based at one with putting a farm manager in place at the other, and running that kind of on our principles, but through a member of staff. That would be the ideal. And yeah, kind of doing a lot more in the kind of post farm gate food production bit. But really, as I mentioned earlier, all I want to do is milk cows. So I promised myself that after my PhD, I used to have a house cow, and she went cull last year because she didn't produce a calf, so she wasn't allowed to stay. But I promised myself that after my PhD, I will, even if it's just 2 cows and a micro dairy, I am going to be milking some cows. So that's something that, yeah, whatever else happens, that's what I want to do.
Do you want to make cheese or butter,
No,
or
I just want to just milk.
milk?
Yeah, I think that liquid milk for me is just the most incredible product, and everybody around here drinks it on a daily basis. And so if I can produce that in a way that is aligned with all of our principles, and it would be seasonal, and it would probably be quite expensive. So there is an issue around, the whole privilege thing, and I need to wrap my head around that. But like seeing the work that the brilliant Phillida Warmington at Cottleston Micro Dairy has done, I'm convinced that yeah, we can make it work.
Awesome. That's so exciting. All right. I know you've been thinking about the hard-hitting questions, so I'm really, really interested to hear your answers. What's the best gig you've ever been to?
Well, I was thinking about this, and actually, there's this little village in Hampshire called Wickham, and they have a festival every year. I don't know if they still do. And it's not that big a festival. It's quite well known, but it's not very big. And James Blunt is basically from there. And one year
Okay.
he headlined it, and we were just like, what? There was like, I don't know, a couple of thousand of us there in this tiny little festival. And James Blunt came out and headlined the whole festival. And he put as much energy into that as he would have done at the O2 or something. I mean, it was incredible. And I'm not even that much of a James Blunt fan for his music, but it really sticks with me as, yeah, just a real surprise and absolutely amazing. And I loved it.
That's really cool. He's so good on social media, though, isn't he?
So funny.
Funny
He's
guy.
so funny.
Yeah. All right. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Because I have ADHD, I never remember advice that people have told me. I'm really, really bad at remembering stuff. I have very bad long-term memory issues. But there's a bit of advice. I think it was Arthur Ashe that kind of had this quote, which was like, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. And I don't follow that advice very well, and I should. And I love it because I'm quite like, I'm an all or nothing. Like, let's just do this thing. Let's get on with it.
Yeah.
And I've often been critical of other people because they haven't been all or nothing. And so it's a little quote that I try and remind myself that it is totally okay to start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can, and not always go whole hog into everything.
Very good. I like that one. Okay. What's the best book you've ever read?
So it has to be, I'm going to say 4 books, but they're all in one series that the amazing Manda Scott wrote, which was all about Boudica, which I think I recommended to you on Twitter
you did.
years ago.
I loved them. Yeah.
What an amazing set of books.
Yeah.
Like, they have everything. They've got nature connection, strong female characters. There's a bit of magic. There's a bit of intrigue. There's drama. There's the history, that kind of Celtic, Roman, like colonial power struggle. Just amazing. Manda's books are absolutely incredible. And that series of 4, I think I probably read that whole series maybe once every 18 months or so. Like, I just go back to them like old friends. So highly recommend.
They are, without a doubt, some of the best books I've ever read. So yes, thank you for that recommendation. I've just finished a book called In Search of Boudica, and I can't remember the guy.
Oh,
It's a male author. I can't remember his name, but you'll find it, and it's really really good. So he's gone all over Norfolk and kind of yeah, just sort of trying to find where it all happened, and yeah, it's super good though, very very engaging, and yeah, it's not kind of dry at all. It's yeah, it's good. You'll like it.
nice.
Okay, if you could meet any historical figure, speaking about Boudica, who would it be and why?
It wouldn't be Boudica. It would be a woman called Hannah Snell, who in the 1800s disguised herself as a man so that she could join the Royal Marines. And she fought at the Battle of Pondicherry. And she got away with being disguised as a man for like 4 years or something. She even got shot in the leg and was treated, and they still didn't even realize that she was a woman, which I just am quite amazed by. But yeah, like just I would love to meet her and just hear about her experience of one being in disguise for so long and experiencing something that was so unknown for so many women at that point in time, and just yeah, hearing her perspectives, particularly in terms of war and travel, you know, in close confinement with all these people, that she was terrified of being found out at any moment. So yeah, Hannah Snell, what an amazing character she was.
Really cool answer. Okay, and lastly but not leastly, what is your all-time favorite song?
This is the hardest question. And I had to think, what song, if it comes on shuffle, do I never skip? That's how I did it. And there were two. So I'm sorry, it's going to be two. One of them is a song called Diamonds by Lady Six. And it's just this kind of, I don't even know where I first heard it. And it's a kind of, it's like dancey, kind of just, it's a bit ridiculous, really, but I never ever skip it. And I always will turn it up and sing along and just absolutely love that song. And then the other one is Something in the Orange, which is
Zach Bryan.
difficult because Zach Bryan, you know, I love country music and I really love hip hop. And as a feminist, that's a problem because the content of the often the kind of subject
Okay.
matter and
Yeah,
the questionable characters involved in both of those
yeah,
do not align with my kind of feminist ideology. So it is a tricky one. Do you have to separate from the art from the artist? I don't know, but yeah, I can never skip Something in the Orange.
yeah. Okay, that is a great choice. I love Zach Bryan music as well. Okay, Nikki, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time. I think everybody will have realised how busy you are after listening to that. So, yeah, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us today.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I'm so excited when you said, "Would you like to come on the podcast?" I absolutely love it. You've done a great job, and I just love that you brought it back. I was heartbroken when you said rock and roll farming was going, and I'm just so chuffed that you brought it back this year. So thank you ever so much for the time and the effort it takes from you to create such a great podcast.
Oh, that's so nice of you to say. Thank you very much. To everyone at home, thank you for listening and hope to see you next time. Remember to keep spreading the word, like and share and all that jazz. Anyone who wants to come on the podcast, if you've got an interesting story or you know anyone who does, please feel free to get in touch. I've been Will Evans. This has been Rock and Roll Farming. Thank you and good night.